The river was an interesting place. My mother was always fearful of my going to the river for wandering down there, you know. She said, always keep away. And one reason that she stopped me from going down there was she said, if you go down there, she said, you might meet Lai Atkins. Well, I mentioned Lai earlier on. And she said, you don't want to meet him, do you? That was enough to keep me away. It was a horrible open sewer for years and years and years. First of all, it travelled down through the mining valleys, and you had all the coal dust going in there, the washeries. Later on, then, there was a Ryan, Larry Ryan used to sort of reclaim a lot of the old slag heaps up there, and he'd would have a washery there, but not a very expensive one because it was cheaper for him to pay an annual sort of fine for releasing into the river all this coal dust. And as it passed through the trading estate, there was a bone factory there called Liners, and they used to deposit an awful lot of byproducts from their bone processing systems there, so that when you looked at the river, all the stones were all slimy. The river was black. The only marine life that they seemed to attract was eels. I can remember as youngsters, you go down to the Radawea, and if you looked on the side, hundreds and hundreds of, 1,000 probably, of eels just sort of crawling up to get over the weir to find their way further up the valley, up the Taff. Fortunately, that's been addressed, and the river is now at least 80-90% improvement on what it was. One of the things, surprisingly, which helped, although it was a bit of a disaster at the time in 2001, was the foot and mouth disease, when all the footpaths were closed. And it seemed that it was a message to the wildlife to come back in, because the bird life that then came back onto the Taff is phenomenal. Birds you'd never ever seen before, egrets, cormorants, and goosandas and whatnot, you know. Unfortunately, with the opening up of the footpaths some months later, they've all stayed, you know. So, and of course, the river's cleaned up. There's more fish life there now than there was before, and plant life there is growing up from the base of from the floor of the Taff. So it has really had some. That's where you can see an environment improvement. You know, people talk about the environment and whatnot, and you look around and say, "Well, where is it?" You know, but when you look at that and you live in there all the time, you can see the changes that has taken place for the better. Incidentally, prior to all this, they used to use it as a baptism for baptisms. They would take people down there who want to be baptized in the waters of the river. They were a little bit cleaner than I had described for Liners. I never knew this. This is what I'm told. So my grandparents and my parents used to talk about. They used to take them down there, and they used to just sort of dip them in the water and baptize them. The other things they used to go over there were bones. Butchers used to have bones, which they couldn't dispose of. There was no means of recycling bones. You know, they'd bone a side of beef or whatnot, and what have you. And sometimes the dogs would have a bone, but some of them were too big for that. So they used to put them in muslin bags, and over the bridge they went up. The Ennis in particular was a favourite drop-off for them, right over the top, and down they went, and they'd just go down to the Taff. And it's not just the butchers. I'm citing those as an example because I can remember seeing bones in the bottom of the river there. Other people used to put their rubbish in there as well, you know, tip their stuff over the banks into the river. Anyway, fortunately, those days have long since gone. As I say, we walked down there, Rhoda and I, and we looked over onto the side of the river. We saw what we thought was an animal that had been caught up in the branches of a tree there. Anyway, closer look, and we found that we could see that there was a body there. Well, we were quite young at the time and quite aghast that such a thing was there. You know, it had been in the river for some considerable time because it was starting to decompose. The police were informed. They came along and they rescued it, or I shouldn't say they rescued it, they managed to free it from the branches of the tree and take it off for analysis. And I can remember to this day the name of it was a female. Her name was Mrs. Powdernell. And she disappeared off a bridge in Pontypridd some 2 or 3 weeks previously. And they searched and searched. I don't know how far down they searched, but I don't know. There must have been a flood at the time. And anyway, that's the River Taff. That's why I've never stepped foot in it ever since. I've never have. A, lie Atkins, and B, bodies, and C, the filth.